Hello everyone, good evening. From Miss Liz at the Rockville Center Public Library. This is Spooky Story Times. I'm going to read stuff not too scary, but a little bit spooky. And our first book is The Widow's Broom by Chris Van Allsburg. Spooky black people. Witches' brooms don't last forever. There's the witch flying. They grow old, and even the best of them one day lose the power of flight. Fortunately, this does not happen in an instant. A witch can feel the strength slowly leaving her broom. The sudden bursts of energy that once carried her quickly into the sky become weak. Longer and longer, running starts are needed for takeoff. Speedy brooms that in their youth outraced hawks are passed by slow flying geese. When these things happen, a witch knows it's time to put her broom aside and have a new one made. On very rare occasions, however, a broom can lose its power without warning, all at once, and fall with its passenger to the earth below, which is just what happened one cold autumn night many years ago. Here's the witch flying and being passed by the geese, and geese are pretty slow. And there she is falling, even loses her hat. Out of the moonlit sky, a dark cloaked figure came spinning to the ground. The witch, along with her tired broom, landed beside a small white farmhouse, the home of a lonely widow named Minna Shaw. At daybreak, Widow Shaw discovered the witch lying in her vegetable garden. She was bruised and bloody and couldn't stand up on her own. In spite of her fear, and because she was a kind woman, Minna Shaw helped the witch inside and put her to bed. The witch asked Minna Shaw to draw the curtains, then wrapped herself tightly in her black cloak and fell soundly asleep. She lay there perfectly still all day and all evening. When she finally awoke at midnight, her wounds had completely healed. Here's the witch finding her in the vegetable garden. Here's the witch's hands reaching up, saying, "Help me, please." She rose from the bed and moved silently through the widow's house. Minna Shaw was asleep in a chair by the fireplace, where embers of a dying fire glowed on the hearth. The witch knelt and took one of the red-hot coals in her hand. Outside, she made a fire of leaves and twigs, then dropped a strand of her hair into the flame. The fire hissed and crackled, burning with a brilliant blue light. Before long, the witch could see a dark form flying overhead. Here's the witch coming outside, calling for her friend at the fire. It was another witch who circled slowly and landed beside the fire. The two women spoke briefly, the first witch gesturing toward her garden where her old broom rested. They sat side by side on the second witch's broom and flew off over the treetops. When Minna Shaw woke up, she wasn't surprised to find that her guests had gone. Witches, she knew, had unusual powers. It didn't surprise her either when she saw that the old broom had been left behind. The widow guessed it had lost its magic. It was an ordinary broom now, just like the one she kept in her kitchen. She began using it around the house and found that it was no better or worse than any broom she had used before. One morning, Minna was still in bed when she heard a noise coming from the kitchen. She peeked in and saw something that made her heart jump. There was the broom sweeping the floor all by itself. It stopped for a moment and turned to the widow and went back to work. There's the broom, and Minna looked so scared. I would be too. At first, Minna was frightened, but the broom seemed harmless, and what's more, it was doing a very good job. Unfortunately, it swept all day long. In the evening, to get some peace, she locked the broom in a closet. But when it tapped on the door for more than an hour, Minna felt guilty and let it out. As she lay in bed, listening to the broom sweeping each room over and over, she wondered if it could learn to do other things. In the morning, she led the broom outside and found that it was a very good student. She needed to show it how to do something only once. Soon the broom could chop wood and fetch water, feed the chickens and bring the cow in from the pasture. It could even pick out simple tunes on the piano. Look at that broom feeding the chickens. Still got magic in it. Not a week passed before the widow's neighbors, the Spivies, found out about the broom. Their farm was just down the road, the only other place around. It was one of the 8 Spivey children who saw the broom first. When the boy told his father, Mr. Spivey ran straight across the road to the widow's house. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Did she really have such a broom?" "Oh, yes," Minna Shaw answered. "It's wonderful." She told her neighbor all about the broom and the witch who'd left it behind. Then she took him around to the back of the house where the broom was hard at work splitting wood. Mr. Spivey was horrified. "This is a wicked, wicked thing," he said. "This is the devil." The broom stopped working and, still clutching the axe, hopped toward the widow and her neighbor. Mr. Spivey, red-faced with anger, quickly turned and went home. There's the broom chopping wood, and there's the angry Mr. Spivey and the widow Shaw. Soon, more distant neighbors heard about the broom and visited the widow's farm. The men who saw it seemed to agree it probably was a wicked thing. But their wives pointed out that it was a great help to the widow and could play piano as well, considering that it struck just one note at a time. No one's feelings were as strong as Mr. Spivey's. "It's evil and dangerous," he told everyone to listen. "We'll all be sorry if this thing stays among us." As days went by, the broom seemed as innocent and hardworking as ever. Though it had learned how to do many things, sweeping brought its special pleasure. It was, after all, a broom. Occasionally, when there was nothing left to do around the widow's house, it would hop down to the road that separated Minna Shaw's and the Spivies' farms. The road was dirt, of course, and the broom could amuse itself there for hours. Here's all the people coming to see it play the piano, and they look so scared. One afternoon, 2 of the Spivey boys and their dog walked along the road where the broom was happily at work. When they saw what it was doing, they kicked at the small stones the broom had swept aside back into its path. The broom ignored them and shuffled off to sweep another part of the road. But the Spivey boys would not leave it alone. They called the broom names. When it continued to ignore them, they picked up a couple of sticks and started tapping the broom's handle. There they are, bothering the broom. Probably not a good idea. Finally, it stopped sweeping. The broom turned to the 2 boys and knocked them both on the head so hard they fell to the ground in tears. The broom hopped off, but the Spivey dog ran after it, yapping and biting at its bristles. "Get it! Get it!" the boys yelled. The little dog leaped into the air and caught the broom by the handle, but he was not there for long. There's the dog biting the top of the broom, and that's what the broom did. It threw the dog away. Oh my goodness. That evening, Mr. Spivey drove his wagon up to the widow's house. He was not alone. 3 men from the neighboring farms were in the wagon, along with a long wooden stake and coils of rope. Mr. Spivey knocked loudly. When she opened her door, Minna was frightened by what she saw. "We've come for the broom," the neighbor told her. "It's beaten my sons and likely done worse to my dog." The poor animal was nowhere to be found. The widow could tell by their faces that the men would not be leaving without her broom. There was nothing she could do to stop them. For a moment, she stood silently. Then she answered, "Of course you are right. If it could do such a thing, we must get rid of it." She led the men into her kitchen. "It sleeps in here," she whispered, pointing to a closet. "If you move it very carefully, it will not move." The men knew how strong the broom was and hoped the widow was right. So there's the closet where she led them to the broom. They opened the closet door, revealing the slumbering broom. One of the farmers took it out and gently held it against the stake, while the others wrapped it in yards of rope. They carried the broom outside, drove the stake into the ground, and gathered straw around it. Mr. Spivey lit the fire. In no time, the flames turned the broom into ashes. There's the men after they did it, and there's Widow Shaw watching the burning fire. Life soon returned to normal around the widow's farm. The Spivies even found their dog, healthy but hungry, caught in the branches of a tall spruce tree. Then one evening, Minna Shaw called on her neighbors with frightening news. She had seen the ghost of the broom. It was as white as snow. and moved through the woods at night carrying an axe. Mr. Spivey did not believe her, but that night, under a full moon, he watched from a window as the broom's white ghost came out of the woods and slowly circled his house. The next night it returned, circling even closer, and the night after it came again, tapping the axe lightly on the Spivvy's door. And there's the ghost broom with the axe coming closer to their farm. Wow. The next morning, Mr. and Mrs. Spivey packed their dearest possessions and 8 children into their wagon. Mr. Spivey tried to convince the widow to leave with them, but she chose to stay behind in her little farmhouse. She went down to the road as the wagon pulled away and waved goodbye to her neighbors. "You're a brave woman," Mr. Spivey called out. That evening, the widow fell asleep in her chair by the fire. She'd been listening to music, simple tunes on the piano, played one note at a time. A gentle tap on the shoulder woke her. She looked up and smiled at the broom, not a ghost at all, but still covered with the coat of white paint she'd given it. "You play so nicely," Minna Shaw said. The broom bowed, put a log on the fire, and played another tune. And there's the widow with her clever broom. She's clever too. That was a great idea to trick the Spivies, because that broom is helpful. And that's The Widow's Broom by Chris Van Allsburg. Now there'd be one more book, because that was a long one. And this is called A Dark, Dark Tale by Ruth Brown. Dark, dark tale. Once upon a time, there was a dark, dark moor. Looks dark. On the moor, there was a dark, dark wood. In the wood, there was a dark, dark house. At the front of the house, there was a dark, dark door. Behind the door, there was a dark, dark hallway. In the hallway, there were some dark, dark stairs. Up the stairs, there was a dark, dark passageway. Does look spooky. Across the passage was a dark, dark curtain. Behind the curtain was a dark, dark room. In the room was a dark, dark cupboard. Don't look in it. In the cupboard was a dark, dark corner. The darkest part of that creepy cupboard. In the corner was a dark, dark box. And in the box, there was a mouse. Just a little mouse who looked so scared in her bed. Oh. And that's A Dark, Dark Tale by Ruth Brown. I hope you enjoyed a couple of spooky stories from Miss Liz at the Rockville Center Public Library. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye now.